Okay. So I know you guys. You may know why I didn't video last night because I went out with my friend 21 party, yes, but it was late time. But very sorry for that, but I'll not do time for a new video, but because I want to be new video will be 9 o'clock because the last video was team at 9 o'clock. So yeah, so today this video we're going to do reaction to some dude version of the MCU called the Skrull and the Vision and Saga. So yeah, so right now I want something to see you guys. So I'm going to do reaction. So this PS2. So I'm going to do this video going to reaction part 1 and part 2. Yes, so we're going to be in the video set up. So the video going to be edit together when they finish part 1, and then we're going to reaction part 2, and then we'll put it edit together and then post on YouTube. So enough of the talk for that. So that's reaction.
Back to my series, and in this video I'll basically be covering phase 2 of what if Marvel never sold their character rights, so that being Spider-Man, the X-Men, Fantastic Four, etc. And if you didn't know, this is an ongoing series, so I'm planning on making phases 1, 2, 3 the Secret Invasion Saga, and making the rest of the phases the Infinity Gauntlet Saga and the Secret War Saga. So please check out the phase 1 video if you haven't already, or else you'll probably be very confused when I dive into this video. So without further ado, let's begin.
Let's do this.
So kicking off this phase will be The Incredible Hulk 2. And this movie will basically deal with the fallout of the first Avengers movie, with Hulk basically still being on the run, since even though he did help the Avengers during the fight with Loki, he's still not trusted by the military, so Thunderbolt Ross is still trying to capture the Hulk. So this movie will basically be about Hulk still on the run from the military and trying to avoid causing mayhem at the same time. But in this movie it would actually play sort of quite differently, since Hulk and Banner will basically be dual personalities, with each side trying to take over the other. So it'll kind of be like that situation in Infinity War where Hulk and Banner were talking to each other, but that's basically for most of the duration of the movie. So it's basically about them trying to coexist with each other, and this movie will actually be the first time where we actually see the Hulk talking. But I mean, he's not gonna be Professor Hulk. He'll just be barely be able to form sentences. So kind of like how he was in Thor Ragnarok. So yeah, this movie will feature that, and also I'm planning on having the villains be the leader, who was teased in the first Incredible Hulk film, and Absorbing Man, because I personally think he's pretty cool, and I feel like he really should have been in a Hulk film, since I feel like his power set would be perfect for live action, and he can give a Hulk a real challenge, since Leader will basically be the type of guy who's pulling the strings behind the scenes, and Absorbing Man will basically be the kind of the secondary antagonist who challenges Hulk physically, while the Leader challenges him mentally. So Absorbing Man's origin will pretty much be the same as the comics, and by the end of the film the Hulk defeats both him and the Leader, of course, but how Hulk defeats the Leader, it won't be just with brute strength, since the Hulk actually has to utilize his Bruce Banner side to outsmart the Leader. So Bruce Banner side will basically be a big help in stopping the Leader. So both the Leader and Absorbing Man are defeated by the end of the movie, and instead of killing them off, I'd rather have them saved for a future storyline down the road. So yeah, they won't just be one-off villains in this movie. And I'm also having this movie be released in March, because that's basically the holiday month of St. Patrick's Day, and the Hulk's green. You get it? Alright, moving on. And the next movie after this phase will be Captain America: The First Avenger. So not much really changes with this movie. I actually really like this movie. It's actually one of my favorite MCU movies. So not much really changes, except One thing I would add is I'd have Wolverine make a cameo. He won't be a major part of the movie, but just have him be like someone who works with Captain America during, like the little montage scene that they have with Cap freeing all the soldiers. And yeah, just have Wolverine be part of that, because if you add Wolverine into the movie, I don't really want him to like overshadow Captain America, since it's pretty much his movies. But I'd have basically Wolverine make a cameo just to plant the seeds of him later on down the line. So yeah, the whole movie still stays the same, and Cap still wakes up 70 years later. Except the post-credit scene won't be a trailer of the Avengers, since that movie already happened in this version of the MCU. And the next movie after Captain America will be the Wolverine. And the opening is pretty much the same thing as it was in X-Men Origins Wolverine, which was pretty much the only good thing about that movie. So yeah, I'd keep the opening, and this will basically be an origin movie of how Wolverine got his adamantium and how he met Stryker and the Weapon X task force, basically. So the main villain of this movie will be Sabretooth, and I kind of want him to be played by the same actor who played him in Origins, since I thought he did a phenomenal job at like capturing the essence of Victor Creed. So Sabretooth will be the main villain, and Stryker would sort of be like a side antagonist trying to capture Wolverine and turn him into a mindless weapon. So that'll basically be the whole plot of the movie, and it'll be established that the adamantium experiment was an attempt at trying to replicate what happened with Steve Rogers and Captain America, since both of those heroes exist in the same universe. So Stryker will be trying to recreate the super soldier serum, which, basically we all know goes pretty wrong. And Wolverine also won't have his classic yellow costume. Don't worry, he will wear it in this universe, but for this specific movie, I feel like it'd be better if he just didn't have a costume on, since it'll feel more personal, and I wanted to save that for when he actually joins the X-Men. So yeah, you will be seeing more of Tank Top Wolverine. So the movie ends with Wolverine drinking alone in the bar.
I watched that before, but when I watched it, have jump scare up and Woody laughter, so hopefully I'm not gonna jump scare.
And someone enters the bar and comes up to him, and it's a familiar face. We all know who it is, and he asks Logan if he would like to be part of a special team, and this is basically what Logan's initial response is.
There you go. Hey kid, just start that's why I may start, I don't know, but maybe put it into squad, but we're not gonna do pet stuff, sorry, and I didn't mean it, doesn't mention I would do pet stuff.
The movie that will be following the Wolverine will be X-Men United. And this movie will see the debut of many other X-Men members that we know. So Wolverine will be joining the X-Men, as well as Storm and Colossus. And the main story will basically be similar to the original X-Men United movie. But instead of William Stryker, I'd rather have the main villain be Mr. Sinister, since I really find him to be a very interesting X-Men villain, and I feel like he really should have been in an X-Men movie beforehand. So yeah, he'll be the main villain, and he'll be joined by his group called the Marauders, and they'll basically be a mutant task force whose main purpose is trying to capture Scott Summers and Jean Grey, because Mr. Sinister believes that their offspring can be the key to helping mutants win this war against mankind. So Mr. Sinister's attention will be focused on Cyclops and Jean Grey, essentially, and this will of course lead to a confrontation with the X-Men. And throughout this movie, we'll see glimpses into Mr. Sinister's backstory and how he's connected with Apocalypse, who will be an antagonist later on in this series. So in this movie, we'll basically be teasing like the greater threat, which is Apocalypse. And during the final battle between the X-Men and Mr. Sinister, unfortunately, one of the X-Men's lose a member, an Angel, who unfortunately is killed by Mr. Sinister. And after the X-Men wins, they are unfortunately seen as more of a threat because of the actions of Mr. Sinister and the Marauders. So by the end of the movies, the fear of mutants is at an all-time high because of not only Magneto and his Brotherhood, but now Mr. Sinister and his group. And all of this fear, hate, and prejudice culminates into the post-credit scene in which a scientist named Boulevard Trask is assigned to create engineered robots designed to hunt down and eliminate any mutants, which the screen then cuts to black. And there's also another post-credit scene which teases Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, who are still mutants in this version of the MCU, and as well as Magneto's children. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 2 is next, and this season will roughly stay the same. To be honest, there are a couple of things I would change about this movie. One being, I would shift the attention less off Jane Foster and more on Thor and Loki's relationship, so it can really build up their characters. And one of the main complaints about the movie was how it focused way too much on Jane Foster. So I'd rather have most of her screen time go to someone that's more likable to audiences, such as Loki. And also, instead of Malekith being the villain, I'd rather have the Enchantress as the main villain of the movie, seeing as how she never really made her debut in the original MCU. So I'd have her be the main villain with her bodyguard Scourge as the side antagonist. And basically, her motivations will more or less be the same as Malekith's, but more screen time will be dedicated towards her so we can understand about her character and why she is the way she is. And Thor's mom will still die in this movie, as well as Asgard being invaded, but instead of dark elves, it will be the type of soldiers that Hela has in Ragnarok, like with the undead zombie version of Asgard soldiers. I'd rather have that, since I feel like that would not only be more visually appealing, but more interesting because of how ironic it is to have fallen Asgard soldiers attack the place that they basically swore to protect. And I'd also have Enchantress have an interest in Thor, basically how it is in the comics, how Enchantress sees Thor as a potential love interest, but Thor obviously wants none of that. So that kind of enrages Enchantress and fuels her motivation even more, because at the end of the day, she's a really vain and selfish person. So she'll basically, if she can't get what she wants, then she'll take it by force. And most of the movie, she'll target Jane because she's the one who has Thor's heart, and it'll basically culminate ultimately in the Enchantress's defeat, in the same way how Malekith was defeated in the Dark World. And the Ether also won't be a part of this movie, as the Infinity Stones, even though I said they're still going to be in the saga, they won't be as big as a role, they won't have as big as a part to play as they will in the Infinity Saga. So the Ether won't be in this movie. It'll basically be everything will be about the Enchantress's power set. And Scourge will also be a physical match for Thor, but he'll also get defeated as well. So by the end of the movie, the Enchantress and Scourge are defeated and imprisoned in Asgard. So I'm still keeping them alive to serve a greater purpose later on in my version of the MCU. And also, Loki still steals the throne from Odin, and it's left ambiguous as to what happens to Odin. So all of that stuff still happens. Loki still faces death, and the movie ends with Loki sitting on the throne. Following Thor Enchanted would be Iron Man 3. And to be honest, this is a movie that I really wish that I loved. Like, the trailer was so hype, and I was just so excited for this movie. But the day it came out, I was just disappointed, to say the least. So if there are anything I would change about this movie, it would be to get rid of that stupid Mandarin twist. Like, I don't know why they if they thought that was funny or nah, I hate it. Just get rid of it. Just go. Get out of here. Get out of here. Go. Bye. So I would have the real Mandarin played by the same actor who would play him later on in Shang-Chi, and basically have the real Mandarin be the one to destroy Tony's house, and basically have Aldrich Killian be the secondary antagonist. So he's kind of like the Mandarin's right-hand man. And this is where I'd actually have Hawkeye make his first debut in this version of the MCU. So instead of that kid Harvey helping Tony out, it would be Hawkeye, and he would be sent by Nick Fury as a way to make sure Tony is still alive and be in that role where he helps Tony repair his armor. So Hawkeye would meet up with Tony in Tennessee, and that's where they would first interact with each other, and they would have that same type of banter they would have in the comics, and just basically it would be sort of like a buddy cop feel with those two, with Tony being like the goofball and just basically not taking anything seriously, and Hawkeye being the stern partner who's just like so sick of Tony's shit, basically. So the movie would still end the same way, with Tony having his armor, all of his suits, basically having a final showdown with Mandarin and Aldrich Killian soldiers. And the Mandarin would also wear his comic accurate rings, so it would be more of a spectacle, with Iron Man finally going head to head with the Mandarin, who is basically his arch nemesis in the comics. So Tony would face the Mandarin in an ultimate battle, in which the victor would be Iron Man, obviously, and Pepper would also wear her rescue armor in this film, as well as Rhodey, who is seen fighting in an upgraded version of his War Machine suit. So with their help, as well as the help of Hawkeye, Iron Man is able to take down the Mandarin once and for all. The Mandarin also would end up dying in this movie, which would result in the Ten Rings organization falling apart. And so Tony would still get his arc reactor removed, as he still has PTSD from his time in space from the first Avengers movie. So that part of the story still stays the same, since I really like the fact how it humanizes Tony's character and by having him tackle real issues. So that part of the plot still stays the same, as well as him blowing up on the Iron Man suits. And so the post-credit scene will feature a dimly lit room that's located somewhere in Asia, which the location isn't specified to us. And it features a woman walking into that room. We don't see her face, but it shows her walking into a room, and the camera pans up to a singular baby crib. So the woman walks up to that crib, and the camera shows two babies in that crib, one boy and one girl. You would recognize them as a younger Shang-Chi and Zhu Xiaoling. The woman smiles at her babies, if not for a second, before that smile quickly turns into a scowl, and she monologues to herself, "You two must grow up fearsome and strong to restore the honor of the Ten Rings, to avenge your father, and to kill the man known as Tony Stark."
So yeah, so that is part 1 finished, so I'll see you next in part 2. Part 2 is the next reaction.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 will be kicking off this video, and to be honest, do you remember that time when I said Gwen Stacy's dad will be still alive in the first Amazing Spider-Man movie? Gwen Stacy's dad doesn't die in this movie, since I wanted to save that for maybe a possible sequel. So yeah, I changed my mind. Captain Stacy will still die in the first Spider-Man movie. So now that we have that out the way, let's continue with the movie. So I wanted to open up the scene with, instead of having Peter's parents, which for the record will not be part of this movie at all, since that was one of my main dislikes about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was how they focused too much on Peter's parents, and for the comics they basically just have one storyline, but that's about it. So the opening scene for this version will be Norman Osborn, who was teased in the first movie and is basically running tests with another scientist, and he's basically experimenting on himself to try and recreate the super soldier serum that made Captain America. And so I think we all know how that planned out. And then Norman Osborn, he goes insane basically from the serum, and he chokes out the scientist, and it's pretty much reminiscent of the scene from Tobey Maguire's first Spider-Man movie. And so the scene closes out with Norman slowly walking into an armory where it reveals a prototype Goblin outfit. And then the screen cuts to the Amazing Spider-Man 2 title card. So in the opening action sequence, it's pretty much, it will be the same, but instead of having just Paul Giamatti just being a crazy guy driving a truck around, I'd rather have him in a more comic accurate Rhino suit. So the suit won't be fully mechanical. It'll pretty much be like the same design as it was in Spider-Man PS4, but just like with obviously more CGI, and basically just have Paul Giamatti voice the Rhino and have CGI just do the rest. So Spider-Man will be facing off against a comic accurate Rhino in the first action sequence, and don't worry, this is just, Rhino will only appear at the start of the movie, so he will not be in this movie again after this action sequence. So Spider-Man chases Rhino throughout the city, and Rhino is just wreaking havoc, and you can hear Jameson on a screen, like on one of those like billboard screen, just like criticizing Spider-Man, and that's just plays out as Rhino is just rampaging through the city. So while this is going on, Peter is trying to prevent as many casualties as possible, and he's trying to web up Rhino in an attempt to stop him, but as we all know, you can't really stop an unstoppable force. So Rhino is just wreaking havoc until Spider-Man finally gets the upper hand and then outsmarts Rhino and manages to subdue him before he can cause any more damage. So after Spider-Man defeats the Rhino, he heads to his high school graduation, and Gwen gives the same speech, and Peter still sees Captain Stacy's ghost, who still dies in the first movie. So that will eventually lead into Peter breaking up with Gwen because she doesn't want to see her get hurt, like how he failed to protect her dad. So all of that stuff still happens. That stuff is great. And the main villains I'm thinking about having for this movie are Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, and Electro. Except Electro will have yellow lightning instead of blue lightning, since I just find it more aesthetically pleasing, and he'll basically look more like his No Way Home counterpart, besides the Iron Man arc reactor, of course. So Peter still meets up with Harry, and they still reminisce about the time they were kids, and I actually want to add a flashback scene to when they were actually still kids. It's kind of similar to the Spider-Man 2 PS5 cutscene where Peter and Harry are sneaking into Midtown High. So I wanted to add that scene just to like further cement Peter and Harry's relationship to the audience and how they're practically best friends who hasn't seen each other in a long time. Also, Max Dillon in this movie won't be a Spider-Man fanboy. He'll pretty much just be a guy who's basically down on his luck. Just Peter. If he never got bit by a spider, he's just like, everyone hates him for some reason, and he's just the punching bag of everything. So I wanted to make that happen so the audience can sympathize with Max before he turns into a supervillain. And so this movie will focus more on Peter and Gwen's relationship and how that basically develops. And as for Norman Osborn, he'll still don the Green Goblin outfit and basically tries to take out his competitors, because similar to Spider-Man 1, he's afraid that Oscorp will be run to the ground and eventually bought out. So in order to stop that from happening, he suits up as a Green Goblin and tries to kill his competitors before they can take his business. So obviously, while Green Goblin is on one of his rampages, he runs into Spider-Man. And that will actually be the first time that those two will meet and actually fight one another. So while that is happening, Max Dillon actually is at Oscorp, and he hears what's going on from his iPod, and he still falls into the pool of electric eels and still becomes Electro, but not immediately, because of course his skin is charred, and Oscorp tries to cover it up by having him be killed off in secret. But as we all know, Electro's still alive. So by this time, Peter has already fought the Goblin, and the Goblin has already escaped. And instead of trying to figure out about his parents, Peter is instead trying to figure out who the Green Goblin could be. So he tries to narrow it down, and it's a little montage where Peter tries to pinpoint who exactly could be the Goblin. So kind of like in the original movie where Phillips was playing that song. I forgot what it's called. So anyways, Electro still manages to escape, and he stumbles onto Times Square, and his interactions with Spider-Man is still the same, but instead of being mad that Spider-Man forgot who he was, he's instead mad at all the people just basically always putting him down, and all that rage and anger just cultivates when everyone starts throwing stuff at Electro. So Spider-Man and Electro still has their fight. Electro still gets captured, and instead of Harry, it's actually the Green Goblin who helps break Electro out and promises Electro to take down Spider-Man once and for all. So Electro and Spider-Man still have their final fight, and of course, I'm pretty sure some of you were expecting this, but Green Goblin manages to kidnap Gwen Stacy, and instead of flying to the clock tower, it's actually the Brooklyn Bridge, in which the Green Goblin, you already know how it ends, and Spider-Man fails to capture Gwen Stacy, and Gwen Stacy unfortunately dies from Spider-Man's web or the fall damage. Who honestly knows? But this enrages Spider-Man, and he vows to hunt the Green Goblin down. And so he chases down the Green Goblin, and he and the Green Goblin has this massive climactic fight where Green Goblin is flying all over New York, and Spider-Man is angrily trying to catch him, and eventually both of them land in a secluded warehouse where Spider-Man beats the living daylights out of the Green Goblin, and Green Goblin tries to take off his mask to stop the onslaught that Spider-Man is giving him, and Peter is surprised that it's actually Norman Osborn under the mask, his best friend's dad. And so Green Goblin tries one more time to kill Spider-Man by trying to repel him with his glider, but we already know how that ends, and the Green Goblin dies, and Spider-Man just loses, one, his best friend's dad, and two, his girlfriend. So the movie will end on a pretty sad note, with Spider-Man vowing to never wear the mask again, similar to the Spider-Man No More comic. And as for Harry Osborn, he drowns himself in drug abuse to cope with the death of his father and having to run his company at the same time. So the movie will basically have a sad ending, and Peter Parker will quit being Spider-Man.
I gotta be me.
Not here.
I gotta be me. What else?
For now, at least. The next movie after Spider-Man will be Fantastic Four. And honestly, I'd have this movie be set in the 1960s. One, because I always saw the Fantastic Four as more of a classic group, the more retro. Kind of like the show Full House. That's what the Fantastic Four kind of remind me of. And my second reason being that I want to have this movie be in the midst of the Cold War that actually happened. So this would be an origin movie that will explain how the Fantastic Four got their powers. So starting the movie off, we'll have the lead scientist of the Baxter Foundation named Reed Richards, and basically trying to build a spaceship so America can get ahead of Russia in the space race. And accompanying him will be his wife Sue Storm, her little brother Johnny Storm, and Reed's best friend Ben Grimm. So Reed will ultimately feel pressured to speed up the process of his spaceship because he wants America to make it ahead of the space race so they can get to the moon faster. So Reed, along with Sue, Ben, and Johnny, will all aboard the spaceship. Sue is coming because she wants to help her husband accomplish his goals. Ben is coming so he can pilot the spaceship, and Johnny is coming because he's bored. So the spaceship then takes off, and it's basically the same as their comic origin where they get blasted by cosmic rays which causes mutations on their bodies, and they all gain their respective superpowers. So Reed has the ability to stretch any part of his body to insane amounts. Johnny has the ability to lit his body on fire. A thing basically turns into a rock monster, and Sue Storm can turn invisible and make force fields. And so the main villain I'd have for this movie would be Doctor Doom, just as a way for him to be not only to have him be in the MCU early, but basically have him be a parallel to Reed, as both of them are pretty much two sides of the same coin, and I see them as basically rivals in a sort of way. So Doctor Doom's origin will play out the same as it did in the comics, with him trying to create a device when he and Reed were younger to try and bring his mom back from hell. But of course the experiment went wrong, and the result was Victor having a permanent scar on his face. So in this movie, he's going to try and recreate that weapon because he believes that he has all the necessary materials, but he doesn't know that the machine can cause a huge reaction throughout the city and will basically destroy everything if it's turned on to its full capacity. So kind of like the machine that Dr. Octopus tried to use in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. So it'll basically be like that, but on a larger scale. So the Fantastic Four will try to stop Doctor Doom, and they'll basically go travel to Latveria, where Doom currently resides and is actually the ruler of that country. And so the Fantastic Four will have a huge climactic battle with Doom, which will result in the machine that Doctor Doom created to go haywire and malfunction and basically trap both him and the Fantastic Four in an alternate dimension in where time passes differently than it would be on Earth. So throughout those 40 years, the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom would be trapped in that alternate dimension. So that's why we didn't see them in Phase 1 or any of the other previous movies. And it wouldn't be until the ending of the movie in which Reed Richards finally manages to build a device that will allow the Fantastic Four to return home. And so Reed Richards uses the device, which allows the entire family to come back to Earth. And basically, it'll be a Captain America situation in where they're surprised and shocked to see how much things has changed. Because remember, the Fantastic Four didn't age that much because of the rules in that dimension. And Doctor Doom also would escape that same dimension, and basically the Fantastic Four will try to pursue him before he can cause any more damage, but Doctor Doom manages to escape from them and travel back to his home country of Latveria, in which he would try and regain dictatorship. So the ending scene would play out with a bunch of military-style cars surrounding the Fantastic Four, and them still confused about their surroundings would instantly have their guards up and in a way to try to defend themselves. But a figure steps out of that car, and you would recognize him as Nick Fury, and he basically walks up to the team and informs them that they have been missing in action for over 40 years, which would understandably shock all of the team members. And that is where I would end the movie. The upcoming movie after will be Giant Man and the Wasp.
Oh, wow.
You might be wondering why I'm calling him Giant Man instead of Ant-Man. Well, that's because I want to delve in more into Hank Pym's giant form, which would be Giant Man. So he'll be using that form for upcoming fight scenes in the movie. So I would have the villains in this movie be MODOK and AIM as a whole. And I'd add Ghost in the mix too, just as a mercenary hired by AIM to take down Giant Man and Wasp. So the plot of the movie will basically be AIM trying to use the Pym particles for their own nefarious purposes. And obviously Hank Pym doesn't want to lend his technology to AIM, so AIM is going to try and take it by force. So as a way to do that, they will send Ghost into Pym Labs and try to steal some Pym particles, but she gets caught by Janet Van Dyne, and then a huge fight ensues. And it's not until Hank Pym steps into the fight in which Ghost manages to escape and take some Pym particles with her. So Giant Man and Wasp will both travel to AIM headquarters and try to retrieve those Pym particles back and take down AIM. So Giant Man and Wasp sneak into AIM headquarters and manages to retrieve some of the Pym particles back, but unfortunately they are caught by none other than MODOK. And so MODOK orders his soldiers to take down Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne as well as Ghost. And so a huge climactic battle ensues in which Ghost gets defeated and MODOK is forced to step into the conflict and try to take down Giant Man and Wasp on his own. And so Hank Pym transforms into Giant Man and tries to stomp on MODOK, but MODOK uses his laser beam and blasts Hank Pym in the chest, which stumbles him back a bit. And Wasp tries to attack MODOK, but she can't because MODOK has force fields activated. And so MODOK as well as AIM manages to take down Giant Man and Wasp and basically imprison them in one of their facilities. But Hank and Janet manage to escape, and that leads into a final battle between both them and MODOK, which is a hard-fought battle until Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. arrives to assist Giant Man and Wasp in taking down MODOK. MODOK is eventually overwhelmed and subdued, and is later taken to a high-security prison known as the Raft. By the end of the movie, Hank Pym is recounting all of the sudden threats of supervillain and superhuman activities. So he has the idea of artificial intelligence if any more superhuman threats try to threaten lives. And so by the ending scene, we'll see schematics, blueprints if you will, of an outline that Hank Pym seems to be working on titled The Ultron Project. The next MCU project that will be released will be Daredevil, which honestly, nothing really changes. This is a really awesome show, but some people might not agree and they might want to make this turn into a movie, but honestly, I feel like Daredevil would work perfectly in a TV show format, so he'll still have the TV show here, and the only thing that I would add would to have like a couple references to Spider-Man and have J. Jonah Jameson make an appearance just to have the universe feel more connected as a whole.
With Vinted's new categories, you can now sell even more pre-loved items. Don't use it, sell it.
Explosive, fresh, Domino's Ultimate Masala Paneer, part of the Ultimate Indian.
And now, the movie we've all been waiting for, Avengers Age of Ultron. So the way that I would start this movie off would be similar to the original, but it will be acknowledged that the Avengers gain 2 extra members, which are Captain America and Hawkeye. And so the scene plays out with the Avengers raiding a Hydra base to retrieve Loki's scepter, but instead of having Baron von Strucker be the main antagonist of that sequence, I'd rather it be Red Skull. And if you're wondering how Red Skull would be still alive at this point in time, it will be established that the Tesseract that supposedly obliterated Red Skull was actually a teleporter, similar to what was explained in Infinity War. But instead of him being teleported to space, he was just teleported to another location on Earth. But that event would cause his body to be brutally damaged and mutilated, as an Infinity Stone would have the effect on a regular person. But fortunately, due to the super soldier serum in Red Skull, he manages to survive, but barely. So he was later found by Hydra soldiers who took him back and used as much Hydra resources that were available at the time to nurse him back to health. And after Red Skull was nursed to a better condition, they then later suspended him in animation as per the request of Armin Zola, since the world at that time thought that the Red Skull was dead. So it was better for Zola to play his cards right and to play into that belief. And it wasn't until Captain America was revealed to be alive that Hydra finally released the Red Skull from their suspended animation as a way to prepare in case Captain America would ever try to take down Hydra once and for all, which is happening right now along with the Avengers backing Cap up. So the opening scene would remain the same, with the exception of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, who won't appear in this movie. They're still on the X-Men side of things. So Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver won't be in this scene or in this movie. So Iron Man then manages to bring down the shield that was shielding the Hydra base, which allows Captain America to break in and confront the Red Skull, which their interactions would be pretty much what you expect. And they have a huge fight, which results in Captain America knocking the Red Skull out. This also allows the opportunity for Iron Man, along with Hank Pym, to retrieve the scepter. But instead of Iron Man, I have Hank Pym hold the scepter and reveal that illusion that Tony had in the original. So that won't be because of Wanda's powers in this version. That will actually be because of the influence of the scepter, which warps Hank's mind and shows his greatest fears. So after the Avengers take down Hydra, it will show a scene in which Hank is more devoted than ever in completing his project, in which Tony actually stumbles onto and offers to help Hank with his experiment. And so with the combined efforts of Hank and Tony, along with Bruce from time to time, they were able to finally complete the Ultron project. So after a while, Ultron would gain sentience and he would still take over Jarvis and basically take over all of the Iron Man robots. While this is happening, the Avengers would still have their party, with Hank joining in on the argument that Thor and Tony had on who has the better girlfriend. And after that, we would get a scene of Cap still trying to adjust to this new life that he basically has right now, and Tony would come up to him and he would ask how he's doing, and both of them would just converse about life and how Cap knew Tony's dad and what his dad was like. So this scene will basically serve as a way to build these characters' relationship and basically build up their development and respect towards one another. So after that, Ultron would still crash the party, and one thing that I didn't really like about the original Age of Ultron was how they made Ultron basically too charismatic, to be honest, since Ultron in the comics is supposed to be this stone-cold robot bent on ending humanity, but in the movie, he was basically kind of like Tony Stark in a way, and that makes sense since Tony Stark did create him, but I prefer how Ultron was perceived in the first Age of Ultron trailer, where he was just this cold, calculating, and menacing threat, and that would still stick with this version of the movie. So Ultron won't really show any emotion. He'll just be this stone cold robot bent on killing the Avengers and killing humans as a whole. So Ultron, along with his army of Iron Man robots, would try to attack the Avengers, which of course the Avengers will prevail, and Ultron gets defeated for now. And the rest of the scene would still play out with everyone basically being pissed at Hank for creating such a thing, and Tony trying to back Hank up, which would ultimately lead to Tony also getting some heat as well, since he helped Hank create Ultron. So while that's going on, Ultron will, instead of trying to steal vibranium, he'll instead trying to get his hands on adamantium, since in the comics, adamantium is shown to be more dense and stronger than vibranium. So Ultron would need a team to help him with his goals. And instead of recruiting Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, since those two aren't in this movie, I'd rather have him break into the raft and break out some known supervillains in order to help him for his cause. So the prisoners that he breaks out will be Abomination, Absorbing Man, Ghost, Crimson Dynamo, as well as Scourge and the Enchantress, who decides to help Ultron because Enchantress still blames Thor for ruining her plans, so she wants to try and get back at Thor by taking apart and destroying the place he loves the most, which would be Midgard. And so, with a little inspiration from Nando V Movie's version of Age of Ultron, I'd have this be the MCU version of the Masters of Evil, with Ultron as the leader. And so the Masters of Evil will travel to South Africa in order to obtain adamantium, and the Avengers would follow them into the country, which would lead into a confrontation between the Avengers and the Masters of Evil. Iron Man would take on Ultron, Captain America will fight Absorbing Man, Thor would be fighting both Scourge and Abomination, the latter of which is wondering where the Hulk is, in which we know, of course, that he is still in the Quinjet waiting for Code Green. And so that leaves Crimson Dynamo and Ghost to be fighting Hawkeye, Ant-Man, and Wasp. And you might be wondering where the Enchantress is in all this. Well, in this fight, I'd have her take Wanda's place as the one who's warping the Avengers' minds and showing them their nightmares. And so, while all the fighting is still going on, Enchantress will pretty much be in the background and sneakily using her powers to warp the Avengers' minds, until Hawkeye, of all people, manages to outsmart the Enchantress and sticks her with that same electric arrow that he sticks Wanda with in the forehead. And that results in Scourge breaking away from his fight with Thor to punch Hawkeye in the chest and managing to escape with Enchantress to safety. Unfortunately, while Scourge and Enchantress are outside away from the battle, she manages to catch a glimpse at Bruce Banner still in the Quinjet, which gives her an idea, in which I think we all know how that plays out. And so after Iron Man defeats Ultron and shoots him with a missile, he uses his Veronica project to send him parts of the Hulkbuster armor in order to stop Hulk's rampage. So while that's going on, the other members of the Masters of Evil manage to escape as well, leaving the rest of the Avengers bruised and battered. So the Hulk and the Hulkbuster still have that fight, in which results in the Hulk snapping out of his mindless rage and looking at the damage he's caused before being knocked out by the Hulkbuster. And so the Avengers would still go to Hawkeye's farm, who will reveal will still have his family in this version, and basically go to the farm to try and lick their wounds and try and come up with a plan to stop Ultron, in which they would encounter Nick Fury, who of course scolds Hank for creating a weapon of mass destruction and gives the Avengers some ideas in a way to ultimately stop Ultron. The rest of the movie will still play out the same, with the Avengers heading to Korea in order to stop Ultron from activating his new project, which would of course be his body, which would ultimately be Vision. The Masters of Evil would be present in this battle as well, but some of them would be a bit skeptical of Ultron, realizing that his plan can ultimately lead to their deaths as well, which leads up to some of the Masters of Evil members rebelling against Ultron, those of which are Ghost and Absorbing Man. So while Cap is fighting Ultron, those two decide to help him and trying to stall Ultron, while the Avengers go and try to retrieve Vision's body. This leads to Ultron fighting both Ghost and Absorbing Man, and in a battle which he manages to kill Ghost by using his optic blast, and Absorbing Man, who manages to stall Ultron long enough so Cap can get Vision's body before Absorbing Man is killed. The Avengers, now with Ultron's new body, which is Vision, would head back to the lab, and Hank would offer the idea of doing the same thing to Vision about what he did with Ultron, in which Tony and Bruce would agree, but of course Captain America, Janet, and Hawkeye would disagree, obviously, which would lead into a little scuffle between the Avengers, which will ultimately be broken up by Thor, who uses his powers to give Vision life. And so when Vision first wakes up, he is a little confused and honestly looks a little scared, but once he sees all the Avengers in defensive position, he then gets a little aggressive himself and goes after the first person he sees, which would be Thor. And so Thor and Vision would have a little altercation in which Vision would match Thor's strength, and Thor would be surprised that Vision can take his punches. The rest of the Avengers would try to attack Vision as well, but there would be no match, as Vision is nearly as strong, if not stronger, than Ultron himself. And so the fight would end with Thor throwing Vision into a window, which Vision would stop and stare outside that window and looking at the dark sky and bright lights of New York City, in which he would stop fighting the Avengers and would eventually calm down enough to listen to the Avengers and settle on helping them stop Ultron from doing what he wants to do. And so Vision would still lift up Thor's hammer as a way to let the Avengers know that they can trust him, and the Avengers would head to Sokovia, as Ultron will be planning on using his device there, as well as the remaining members of the Masters of Evil, which are Abomination, Crimson Dynamo, Scourge, and Enchantress. So Ant-Man would head to the site first in order to confront Ultron and basically try one last time to convince him to stop what he's doing. And there'll be a lot of philosophical talk about the concept of life and humans, in which Ultron would then make his statement concrete and basically affirm his opinions on humans and seeing how as they should all be exterminated. So with no other option, Hank then transforms into Giant Man and proceeds to battle Ultron, who still has his new upgraded suit in this version, so this battle would be much harder than Hank would anticipate, and Ultron would end up overwhelming his giant form, resulting in Hank turning back into his regular-sized human form, which results in the rest of the Avengers joining the fray, as well as the remaining members of the Masters of Evil. And so the Avengers and the remaining members of the Masters of Evil would have a final battle in which Ultron would realize the numbers advantage and would call in his army of Ultron bots to even the playing field, for him at least. And so the Avengers would try their hardest to stop and defeat as much Ultron bots as they can, but they quickly come to realize that it is simply too many and they won't be able to stop Ultron in time. That is until a stray laser beam comes flying through the screen and proceeds to blast an Ultron bot that was about to attack Hawkeye. And so the camera shifts up into who shot that laser beam, which would reveal Cyclops, accompanied with all the rest of the members of the X-Men. The Avengers, the Masters of Evil, and Ultron would be shocked and confused on who the hell these guys are, until Ultron would recall in his memory files when he was first born that these must be considered as mutants, which doesn't really matter to him as both humans and mutants are homogeneous to him anyways, so he would still kill the mutants even though they aren't really humans. And so the X-Men come to assist and help the Avengers in their final battle, which leads into the battle of the century, in which both Iron Man and Jean Grey team up and take flights to the sky to debilitate any Ultron bots from above, while Thor and Storm would control the weather together and generate lightning and strike the Ultron bots down. And Abomination would try to attack the Hulk, but Wolverine comes in just in time to attack Abomination before he can land a devastating blow on Hulk. Hulk would then be confused on who Wolverine is, but would later realize that he's an ally. And with the help of Wolverine, he manages to take down Abomination. And so Enchantress would try to get one last shot at Thor, but she is then stopped and lasered by Cyclops, who looks at Captain America with a nod of acknowledgement, and both of them would proceed to continue fighting the Ultron bots. Ultron is devastated and confused on how such weaklings can be able to debilitate his army this much. Scourge will try to strike down Wasp, but then is stopped when Iceman freezes the Executioner's head with an ice blast, letting Beast deal a finishing blow. Crimson Dynamo's whips have no effect on Colossus, who proceeds to beat him down. It was an otherworldly sight, seeing two teams who were unfamiliar with each other, yet fighting as if they fought together for their entire lives. Ultron would then proceed to handle the situation by himself, so he flies down to where all the teams are and grabs Cyclops by the neck and hoists him up into the air, which he intends to deal a finishing blow, but then is later stopped when another hand phases through his own, grabbing Cyclops and placing him down safely on the ground. Ultron is looking around to see who would dare, till he catches a glimpse of what was supposed to be his new body, his Vision. Both Vision and Ultron would have a talk with one another, in which Ultron would of course answer how you would expect him to answer, and Vision, seeing that Ultron is indeed irredeemable and will never see the path of light and goodness. And so Vision, with a heavy heart, would stick his hands into his master's chest, grasping his core and ripping it out of him. Ultron would be shocked and try to kill Vision, but Vision is unfortunately too quick for Ultron, and Vision manages to hammer punch Ultron down to the ground, in which it takes the combined efforts of Iron Man's unibeams, Cyclops' generated laser beams, Thor and Storm's lightning, and Jean Grey's psychic blast, as well as the Wasp's stingers and Iceman's ice blast, to try and melt Ultron's armors away, attempting to eviscerate him, but it was just not enough. That is until Vision joined the mix and used his laser beam placed in the middle of his forehead to attempt and bring down Ultron once and for all, which has actually succeeded, in which Ultron then disintegrates from the pressure of all those concentrated blasts hitting him at the same time. Vision, however, knows that the fight isn't over and flies to the last remaining Ultron bot, in which Ultron has taken control over. And so Vision and Ultron would still have that talk that they had in the original movie, in which Ultron would talk about how humans would never change, and Vision basically replying with, "You should give humans the right to decide." And that ends with Vision blasting away the last Ultron bot. And instead of it being concrete, it is left ambiguous, because not even Vision knows if Ultron is truly dead or not, which sets up hype later in the future. And so the next scene would be Tony Stark asking Cyclops how the X-Men managed to get to Sokovia. Cyclops would reply that Nick Fury sent them, because of the efforts of the X-Men back in X-Men United, where Nick Fury finally sees the true good in mutants. Captain America and Wolverine would also converse, remembering each other from their time in World War II. Thor will take Enchantress and Scourge back to Asgard to face justice for their crimes. Hank Pym will abandon the Ant-Man mantle and head off on his own. The situation with Ultron putting a damper in his and Janet's relationship. Janet, who can't even look him in the eyes. So Hank will travel to an undisclosed location across the world, recounting on all the mistakes he made. With S.H.I.E.L.D., of course, keeping a close eye on him, just in case he tries anything like the Ultron project ever again. I forgot to mention this, but Hulk would still go out on his own in the spaceship since he still feels responsible for endangering all the lives of the people in South Africa due to his rampage. Even though it wasn't his own fault, it was because of the Enchantress's influence, he still feels responsible and would take the Quinjet and set off into space. So yeah, the movie would end on a pretty melancholy note. But fear not, for this won't be the last movie of Phase 2, because I'm planning on having the last movie be Captain America the Winter Soldier, which will see the fall of not only Hydra, but S.H.I.E.L.D. as well. And so this would actually be the first time that Black Widow is introduced into the MCU. And besides that, this movie would pretty much stay the same, but when that Hydra guy was recounting all of the potential Hydra threats, I would add Hank Pym in there as well, just because he's a known superhero and scientist, so it would make sense that Hydra would also see him as a threat. But besides that, the movie will generally stay the same, besides that post-credit scene of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, because that already happened in X-Men United, so that won't be in this film. Instead, I would devote that scene into a bit of a setup in which the government is wanting to enact a certain registration act in which it forces all superhumans and superheroes alike to reveal their identities and work under the government, or else cease all superhuman and superhero activities and retire, or else be arrested and possibly killed, which will play a major part in Phase 3. But that is a video for another time. Thank you so much.
So yeah, so that's it. That's finished reaction some dude version of an MCU Skrull Invasion Phase 2. Yeah, we did with reaction part 1 and part 2 and then this video together this video here. So for you guys down below what you think of this video reaction here. So I kinda really got 2 Captain American film and Phase 2, yes. So yes, that's good here. So hope you enjoy the video, mention thumbs up and then do subscribe. See you next video. But I forgot to mention that, so I'm sorry, but that's whatever. So tomorrow I'm going to something say about tomorrow, but I'm going to reaction to PS3. Yeah, but we will be reaction part 1, part 2 in the same together on tomorrow in the new video here. So it seemed this the new video here. So I'll see you tomorrow. So bye. I'll see you.